The Amazon delivery driver stood on my doorstep with an expression I'd never seen before, somewhere between confusion and concern. "Ma'am," he said, adjusting his cap against the afternoon sun, "I need to ask you something. Why have you ordered 47 packages in the last 2 weeks? I've been doing this route for 3 years, and I've never seen anything like it. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you." I stared at him, my hand frozen on the doorframe of my modest ranch house in suburban Phoenix. 47 packages? I hadn't ordered anything in weeks, maybe months. At 72 years old, I'd finally gotten comfortable with online shopping, but I was careful, deliberate. A book here, some garden supplies there, nothing excessive. "I think there's been a mistake," I told him, my voice sounding uncertain even to my own ears. "I haven't ordered 47 packages. Maybe you have the wrong address." He pulled out his scanning device and showed me the screen. There was my name clear as day. Margaret Ellen Foster. My address. My account. Package after package, all delivered over the past 14 days. All signed for electronically using my credentials. "These all show as delivered and received," he explained, his voice gentle now, as if he sensed my growing panic. "Someone's been accepting them. The signature shows they were left at the door per your instructions, but ma'am, most of these packages, they were big. Heavy. Someone had to bring them inside." My mind raced backward through the past 2 weeks. I'd been feeling more tired than usual, sleeping longer, sometimes waking up disoriented. I'd attributed it to my age, to the Arizona heat, to the natural slowing down that comes with the 7th decade of life. But packages? Large, heavy packages that I apparently hadn't noticed? "Can you show me what was ordered?" I asked, my hands beginning to tremble. He scrolled through his device. "Electronics mostly. Laptops, tablets, gaming systems. Some jewelry. High-end kitchen appliances. Ma'am, we're talking about tens of thousands of dollars worth of merchandise." The world tilted slightly. I reached out to steady myself against the doorframe, and the driver quickly moved forward, concerned. "Are you okay? Should I call someone?" "I'm fine," I managed, though I clearly wasn't. "I just need to understand what's happening." As the driver left, promising to file a report with his supervisor, I walked back into my house on unsteady legs. The living room looked exactly as it always did. My late husband Robert's favorite chair sat in the corner, the Afghan I'd crocheted draped over its back. Family photos lined the mantel. Everything was in its place, orderly, familiar. Nothing suggested that thousands of dollars worth of electronics had recently passed through this space. I made my way to my small home office, really just a converted spare bedroom where I kept my computer and paid my bills. With shaking fingers, I logged into my Amazon account. The driver had been right. Order after order filled my purchase history, items I'd never selected, never wanted, never seen. Gaming laptops, professional camera equipment, designer watches, smart home devices. The total made my stomach lurch. $43,000. Charged to my credit card over the span of 2 weeks. But that wasn't what made my blood run cold. It was the delivery notes. Package delivered to front door as requested. Package brought inside by recipient. All orders confirmed received. Someone had been here in my house accepting these deliveries, moving them, selling them, all while I apparently slept through it or remained oblivious. I lived alone. My son Marcus lived across town with his wife, Vanessa, and their teenage daughter Zoe. They visited regularly, especially Vanessa, who'd become particularly attentive over the past 6 months. She'd insisted on having a spare key, just in case of emergencies. She'd urged me to rest more, to take better care of myself, to not worry so much about every little thing. She'd also been very interested in my finances lately, asking about my retirement accounts, my investments, my monthly expenses. I thought she was just concerned, being helpful. Marcus worked long hours as an architect, and Vanessa had always presented herself as the organized one, the one who took care of family matters. My phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. It was Vanessa. "Margaret, how are you feeling today? I was thinking about stopping by this evening with some of that soup you love." Her voice was bright, cheerful, the voice of a caring daughter-in-law. But now, staring at my computer screen filled with fraudulent orders, that cheerfulness took on a different quality. Something calculated. Something false. I'm fine, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Actually, something strange just happened. The Amazon driver asked me about some packages. There was the briefest pause, so quick I might have imagined it. Oh? What kind of packages? He said I've had 47 deliveries in 2 weeks. Expensive items. Electronics. But Vanessa, I haven't ordered anything. Another pause, longer this time. That's so weird, she finally said. You know, you have been more forgetful lately. Remember last month when you couldn't find your car keys? And you've been mentioning feeling confused about what day it is. Maybe you ordered things and just don't remember. The suggestion was made kindly, wrapped in concern. But it landed like an accusation. Maybe I was losing my mind. Maybe I had ordered all these things in some fugue state and simply couldn't recall. After all, I had been feeling foggy lately, more disoriented than usual. I suppose that's possible, I heard myself say, even as everything in me screamed that it wasn't. Don't worry about it, Vanessa continued, her voice soothing. I'll come by tonight and we'll figure it out together. You know I'm always here to help you, right? That's what family does. After she hung up, I sat in my office chair, staring at the screen. Something was very wrong. I could feel it in my bones, that instinct that comes from 7 decades of reading people and situations. But I needed to be sure. I needed evidence before I accused anyone of anything. I started by checking my credit card statements, pulling up 3 months of transactions. The pattern was there. Hidden among normal purchases but unmistakable once I knew to look. Small charges at first, testing purchases to see if I'd notice. Then increasingly larger amounts. Gift cards. Online transfers. And starting 2 weeks ago, the avalanche of Amazon orders. The total damage was staggering. Over $60,000, charged across multiple credit cards I didn't even remember opening. My hands shook as I scrolled through page after page of unauthorized transactions. I thought about calling Marcus, but something stopped me. If Vanessa was behind this, and if Marcus knew, involving him now would only alert them that I was onto the scheme. If Marcus didn't know, telling him would force him to choose between his mother and his wife, and I wasn't ready to put him in that position without concrete proof. Instead, I called my bank. The representative, a patient woman named Sarah, listened as I explained the situation. Mrs. Foster, I'm so sorry this is happening to you. Unfortunately, this type of identity theft and financial exploitation is increasingly common, especially targeting older adults. The good news is, we can dispute these charges and begin an investigation. How long will that take? I asked. The investigation can take several weeks to several months. In the meantime, I'm going to freeze all your accounts and issue new cards. You'll need to file a police report as well. Do you have any idea who might have access to your personal information? I hesitated. My daughter-in-law has a key to my house. She's been helping me with things lately. Sarah's voice became gentle but firm. Mrs. Foster, statistically, financial abuse of elders is most commonly perpetrated by family members. I know that's difficult to hear, but you need to protect yourself. Change your locks. Secure your documents. And document everything. After I hung up, I sat in the growing darkness of my office, my mind working through the implications. If Vanessa had been stealing from me, she'd done it carefully, systematically. The foggy feeling I'd been experiencing, the increased sleepiness, the disorientation, could those be intentional? Could she have been drugging me somehow? The thought seemed paranoid, the stuff of television dramas. But then again, 2 months ago, I would have said that my daughter-in-law stealing $60,000 from me was equally unthinkable. I needed to search my house. If packages had been delivered here, if someone had been moving merchandise through my home, there had to be traces. Evidence. I started in the garage. Behind some old storage boxes, I found packing materials. Bubble wrap, shipping labels torn off but not thrown away, pieces of cardboard from boxes that had been broken down. They were hidden, pushed back where I wouldn't normally look, but there. Real. Proof that the packages had indeed come here. In the trash can outside, buried under other garbage, I found more evidence. Receipts from a local pawn shop. The items listed matched several of the products from my Amazon account. Gaming laptops. Camera equipment. The dates corresponded with the delivery dates. Someone had been systematically ordering items using my account, having them delivered here, and immediately selling them for cash. I photographed everything with my phone, my hand steadier now that I had concrete evidence. This wasn't my imagination. This wasn't age-related confusion. This was theft, carefully planned and executed. Back inside, I searched more carefully. In the bathroom, behind the extra toilet paper under the sink, I found something that made my chest tighten. A small amber prescription bottle with the label torn off. Inside were white pills I didn't recognize. They weren't mine. I had never seen this bottle before. I took photos of the pills, then used my phone to search what they might be. The results chilled me. Based on the markings, they appeared to be a powerful sleep medication. The kind that could cause profound drowsiness and memory issues if given to someone who wasn't expecting them. Vanessa had been bringing me meals. Soup, she'd said. Homemade dishes she knew I loved. She'd watch me eat.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Always encouraging me to finish everything, praising my appetite. She'd make me tea, special blends she claimed were good for my health. I trusted her completely. Why wouldn't I? She was family. But trust, I was learning, could be a weapon in the hands of someone willing to use it. I needed help, but I needed to be smart about it. Vanessa would be here soon, expecting to find me confused and compliant, easy to manipulate. Instead, she was going to find someone who finally understood exactly what had been happening. I called my neighbor, Patricia Chun, a retired attorney who lived 3 houses down. We'd been friends for 15 years, playing bridge every Thursday, sharing garden vegetables in the summer. If there was anyone I could trust, it was Patricia. Margaret? Is everything all right? You sound upset. Patricia, I need your help. Something's happened and I think I need a lawyer. She was at my door in 10 minutes, her sharp eyes taking in my distressed appearance immediately. I led her to my office and showed her everything. The Amazon orders, the credit card statements, the pawn shop receipts, the photographs of the packing materials, the mysterious pills. Patricia listened without interruption, her expression growing grimmer with each revelation. When I finished, she sat back in her chair and let out a long breath. Margaret, this is serious. This isn't just theft. This is financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. If she's been drugging you to facilitate this, that's assault. You need to contact the police immediately. But what about Marcus? What about Zoe? If I accuse Vanessa, it will tear the family apart. Patricia reached across and took my hand. Margaret, she's already torn your family apart. She's been systematically robbing you while presenting herself as your caregiver. And if those pills are what we think they are, she's been chemically subduing you to make it easier. This isn't a family dispute. This is a crime. I want to confront her first, I said. I want to hear her admit it. I want to understand why. Patricia shook her head. That's not advisable. She could become dangerous if cornered. We should let the police handle this. I need to know, I insisted. I need to hear it from her. But I won't be alone. Will you stay? Will you be my witness? Patricia considered for a long moment, then nodded. I'll stay. But we're going to record everything, and we're going to have 911 ready to dial if things go wrong. And Margaret, once we start this, there's no going back. You need to be prepared for what you might learn. We spent the next hour preparing. Patricia helped me set up my phone to record, positioning it on a bookshelf where it would capture audio clearly but wasn't immediately visible. We went over what I would say, how I would approach the conversation. Patricia would be in the next room, listening, ready to intervene if necessary. At 7 o'clock, right on schedule, I heard Vanessa's key in the lock. The sound that had always represented family and trust now sounded invasive, threatening. She called out as she entered, her voice bright. Margaret, I'm here. I brought that soup I promised. I met her in the kitchen, where she was already setting containers on the counter. She looked perfect as always. Carefully styled hair, expensive athleisure wear, a designer bag hanging from her shoulder. The bag alone probably cost more than some people's monthly rent. Had she bought it with my money? Vanessa, sit down. We need to talk. Something in my tone made her pause. Her smile faltered just for a second before she recovered. Of course. Is everything okay? You look upset. I had an interesting visit from the Amazon driver today. Her hand stilled on the soup container. Oh. He wanted to know why I'd ordered 47 packages in 2 weeks. Well, like I said on the phone, you've been forgetful lately. It's nothing to be embarrassed about. Lots of people your age experience memory issues. The condescension in her voice was barely concealed now that we were alone. My age. My memory issues. All of it designed to make me doubt myself. Except I haven't been forgetful, I said, my voice steady. I've been drugged. By you. The kitchen went very quiet. Vanessa's face went through a series of expressions: shock, calculation, defensiveness, before settling on injured innocence. Margaret, that's a terrible thing to say. Why would I drug you? I've been trying to help you, to take care of you, because Marcus is always so busy. The pills in my bathroom. The prescription bottle with the label torn off. What are those, Vanessa? Her eyes flickered toward the hallway, toward the bathroom where I'd found the evidence. I don't know what you're talking about. The sleep medication you've been putting in my food, in the soup you bring me, in the tea you make. Enough to keep me confused and compliant, while you systematically stole from me. You're paranoid, she said, but her voice had lost its confident edge. This is exactly the kind of irrational thinking that proves you need help. Maybe we should consider assisted living, somewhere with professional staff who can monitor your medications and make sure you're taking care of yourself properly. The threat was clear. She was going to try to have me declared incompetent, to take control of my assets legally if I fought back. $60,000, Vanessa. That's how much you've stolen from me so far. Did you think I wouldn't notice? Did you think I was too old, too confused, too trusting to figure it out? She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. You can't prove any of this. You're a confused old woman making wild accusations. Who do you think people will believe? Me, or someone who can't even remember ordering packages? I have proof, I said quietly. The pawn shop receipts. The packing materials in my garage. The pills you hid in my bathroom. My bank has frozen my accounts and is investigating every transaction. The police will be very interested in all of it. The mask finally fell away completely. The concerned daughter-in-law disappeared, replaced by someone cold and calculating. You stupid old woman, she hissed. Do you have any idea how expensive it is to maintain our lifestyle? Marcus's practice is hemorrhaging money. The house payment alone is crushing us. You're sitting on this property, this retirement account, all this money you don't even need anymore, and you won't help your own son. So you decided to just take it? You were going to leave it to us anyway. I'm just accelerating the timeline. And you made it so easy, Margaret. So trusting. So grateful for a little attention. A few pills in your soup, some kind words, and you handed over everything. Your credit cards, your bank information, your passwords. You practically gift-wrapped it for me. What about the packages? 47 packages, Vanessa. How did you think you'd hide that? She laughed, a harsh sound. You sleep like the dead when you take those pills. I'd come by in the afternoon, collect the packages, have them sold by evening. You never knew. You'd wake up confused, and I'd tell you that you'd just been napping. Sometimes you'd mention feeling strange, and I'd suggest maybe you should see a doctor about your memory. I was building a paper trail, Margaret. If you'd noticed the missing money, I had months of documentation showing your declining mental state. No one would have believed you. Marcus knows about this? For the first time, something that might have been genuine emotion crossed her face. Marcus is weak. He doesn't have what it takes to do what needs to be done. He'd rather work himself to death than ask for help. But I'm not weak, Margaret. I see an opportunity and I take it. That's called survival. That's called theft. That's called elder abuse. And when the police hear this recording, that's called evidence. Her face went white as I pulled my phone from my pocket and held it up. The recording indicator was clearly visible. You can't, she whispered. That's illegal. You can't record someone without their permission. Actually, Patricia said, stepping into the kitchen doorway, in Arizona, only one party needs to consent to a recording. Margaret consented. She's well within her legal rights. And as a witness to your confession, I can testify to everything you just said. Vanessa looked between us, her perfect facade completely shattered. She moved toward the door, but Patricia blocked her path. You should stay right there. The police are already on their way. I called them as soon as you started confessing. In the distance, growing louder, we could hear sirens. Vanessa's face twisted with rage. You'll regret this. Marcus will never forgive you for destroying his marriage. Zoe will hate you. You'll be alone, Margaret. Is that what you want? To be right but alone. I'd rather be alone than be a victim, I said. The words came from somewhere deep, some reserve of strength I didn't know I still possessed. And maybe this will give Marcus a chance to find the courage you said he lacks. The courage to choose truth over convenience. The police arrived 3 minutes later. 2 officers, a man and a woman, both professional and thorough. They listened to the recording. They examined the evidence I'd gathered. They took statements from Patricia and me. And they arrested Vanessa Ellen Foster for elder abuse, identity theft, and fraud. As they led her away in handcuffs, she didn't look back at me. She kept her eyes forward, her spine straight, maintaining that perfect posture even in defeat. Perhaps that was the only real thing about her. That determination to never show weakness, never admit fault. After they left, Patricia helped me sit down. My legs were shaking, the adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation finally draining away. You were incredibly brave, she said. I was incredibly stupid, I countered. I let this happen. I trusted her completely. You loved your family. That's not stupid. What she did, that's on her, not you. My phone rang. It was Marcus. I stared at the screen for a long moment before answering. Mom? Mom, what's happening? The police just called me. They said Vanessa's been arrested? They're saying she stole from you? That can't be right. Tell me that's not right. I could hear the desperation in his voice, the need for me to say it was all a misunderstanding, that everything would go back to normal. It's right, Marcus. I'm sorry, but it's all true. The silence on the other end of the line lasted so long I thought he'd hung up. How much? He finally asked, his voice hollow. About $60,000 that I know of. Probably more. The bank is still investigating. Oh God, Mom, I didn't know. You have to believe me. I had no idea she was doing this. I believe you, I said, and I did. Marcus had his faults, but dishonesty wasn't one of them. He'd been blind to what his wife was doing, perhaps willfully so, but he hadn't been complicit. What's going to happen to her? That depends on what the prosecutor decides to charge her with. But Marcus, she was drugging me. She was stealing from me systematically. This wasn't a mistake or a moment of weakness. This was planned, calculated theft. I don't understand how this happened. How I didn't see it. She was very good at hiding it. And very good at making me doubt myself. What do I tell Zoe? The question broke my heart a little. Zoe was 16, smart, with her whole life ahead of her. Learning that her mother was capable of this would fundamentally alter how she saw the world. Tell her the truth. She deserves that. And tell her that her grandmother loves her. And none of this changes that. The months that followed were difficult in ways I hadn't anticipated. Vanessa was formally charged with multiple counts of elder abuse and fraud. The evidence was overwhelming between the recordings, the documentation I'd gathered, and the bank's investigation that uncovered even more unauthorized transactions I hadn't noticed. She took a plea deal, agreeing to 5 years in prison in exchange for providing full restitution and avoiding a lengthy trial. The money she'd stolen was gone, spent on maintaining the lifestyle she'd mentioned, but the court ordered her to repay me from any future earnings. Marcus filed for divorce immediately. The betrayal wasn't just about what she'd done to me, but what she'd been willing to do to her own family in pursuit of money. He'd spent his career building a reputation for integrity, and she'd nearly destroyed that along with everything else. Zoe took it harder than anyone. She stayed with me for 2 weeks after the arrest, not speaking much, just needing to be somewhere she felt safe. We'd sit on my back porch in the evening, watching the desert sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, and slowly, she began to ask questions. Did you hate her, Grandma? When you found out what she was doing? I considered the question carefully. I think I hated what she did. But more than that, I felt sad. Sad that she thought she needed to do this. Sad that she couldn't see how much she already had. Your father, a family who would have helped her if she'd just asked. She was always worried about money, Zoe said quietly. Always talking about what other people had, what we needed to have to keep up. Dad would tell her it didn't matter, but she never believed him. Some people measure their worth by their possessions. Your mother was one of those people. And that kind of hunger, it's never satisfied. There's always something else to want, something else to acquire. Do you think she's sorry? I think she's sorry she got caught. Whether she's sorry for what she did, I honestly don't know. The investigation revealed that I wasn't Vanessa's only victim. She'd been running similar schemes with several other elderly clients of Marcus's firm, people who trusted her because she was married to their architect. The total damage was over $200,000 across multiple victims. That discovery hit Marcus the hardest. His business nearly collapsed as clients understandably questioned whether they could trust anyone associated with him. He ended up selling the practice and starting over with a smaller firm, rebuilding his reputation one project at a time. 6 months after Vanessa's arrest, I was sitting in my kitchen with Patricia, having our usual Thursday morning coffee. The fog that had plagued me for so long was completely gone. My mind felt sharp again, clear. It was like waking up from a long, strange dream. You know what the worst part is? I said, stirring honey into my tea. Not the money. Not even the betrayal, really. It's that she made me doubt myself. She made me think I was losing my mind, becoming incompetent. That feeling of not trusting your own perception of reality. It's hard to shake even now. Patricia reached across the table and squeezed my hand. But you did trust yourself. When it mattered, you listened to that voice telling you something was wrong. You investigated. You gathered evidence. You protected yourself. That takes incredible strength, Margaret. I should have seen it sooner. You were being systematically drugged by someone you trusted. Under the circumstances, I'd say you figured it out remarkably quickly. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from the Amazon driver who'd first alerted me to the problem. His name was Kevin, and he'd been following my case in the local news. Just wanted to check in and see how you're doing. Glad to see justice being served. If you need anything delivered, I promise to ask fewer questions next time. I smiled and showed Patricia the message. He probably saved my life, you know. If he hadn't asked about those packages, I might have never questioned what was happening. I might have just accepted that I was getting old and confused. So what now? Patricia asked. You've gotten through the crisis. You've protected yourself. Your health is back. What's next for Margaret Foster? I thought about that question. For so long, my identity had been wrapped up in being a wife, a mother, a grandmother. Robert's widow. Marcus's mom. And then, for those terrible months, Vanessa's victim. But who was I now, independent of all those relationships? I think I'd like to help other people, I said slowly. Other seniors who might be experiencing financial abuse, but don't know it or don't know what to do about it. Patricia, how would you feel about starting some kind of education program? Teaching people what to look for, how to protect themselves. Patricia's face lit up. I think that's a wonderful idea. We could work with the senior center. Maybe partner with the police department's financial crimes unit. And that's what we did. Within 3 months, we developed a workshop series on elder financial abuse, covering everything from recognizing the warning signs to documenting evidence to protecting your assets. We held sessions at senior centers, community centers, even at local libraries. Marcus came to one of our workshops bringing Zoe with him. Afterward, he pulled me aside. Mom, I want to apologize. Not just for what Vanessa did, but for not paying closer attention. For being so wrapped up in work that I didn't notice you were struggling. You didn't know there was anything to notice, I said. She was hiding it from both of us. That's just it though. I should have known. I should have been more present. You're my mother, and I took you for granted. Well, you have plenty of time to make up for it now, I said, smiling. I'm not going anywhere. Marcus had indeed stepped up in ways I'd never expected. He called me every day, sometimes just to chat, sometimes to ask advice about Zoe or work or life. We developed a relationship as adults, not just parent and child, and I treasured it. Zoe thrived despite everything. Or perhaps because of it. Seeing her mother's choices and their consequences had made her more thoughtful, more conscious of the kind of person she wanted to be. She volunteered at our workshops, helping with technology demonstrations and bringing a young person's perspective to the discussions. "Grandma," she said to me one evening as we were setting up for a presentation, "do you think Mom will ever be the kind of person who says she's sorry and really means it?" "I honestly don't know, sweetheart. Some people are capable of that kind of growth and change. Others aren't. But that's not your responsibility. You just focus on being the person you want to be, the person you can be proud of." "I want to be like you," she said quietly. "Strong. Someone who doesn't let bad things break them." "Oh, honey, I'm not as strong as you think. I'm just stubborn. There's a difference." She laughed, and the sound was like music. A year after the whole ordeal began, I found myself sitting in my backyard on a spring evening, a book open in my lap. The desert was blooming, wildflowers painting the landscape in unexpected colors. A light breeze carried the scent of jasmine from my neighbor's yard. My phone rang. It was the Arizona State Prison System, an automated message informing me that Vanessa had attempted to contact me and asking if I wanted to accept the call. I'd been receiving these notifications periodically. So far I'd declined them all. I wasn't ready to hear what she had to say. But tonight, for some reason, I felt different. Maybe it was the peaceful evening, the sense of contentment I'd rebuilt in my life. Maybe I was just curious. Whatever the reason, I pressed the button to accept. "Margaret." Her voice sounded different. Smaller somehow. Less certain. "Hello, Vanessa. I wasn't sure you'd answer. You haven't accepted any of my other calls." "I wasn't ready before. I'm not sure I'm ready now, honestly. Why are you calling?" There was a long pause. I could hear institutional sounds in the background, distant voices, electronic locks. I wanted to say I'm sorry. The words hung in the air between us. I waited to feel something, anger, satisfaction, vindication. But mostly I just felt tired. "Are you?" "Sorry, I mean, I've had a lot of time to think," she said. "About the choices I made. About what I did to you, to Marcus, to Zoe. And I know saying I'm sorry doesn't fix anything, but I needed you to know that I understand now. What I did was wrong. Not just illegal, but wrong." "What changed?" I asked. "When you were arrested, you seemed pretty convinced you were justified. Prison has a way of stripping away the stories you tell yourself," she said. "The excuses, the justifications. When you're sitting in a cell with nothing but time, you have to face what you really are. And I didn't like what I saw." "I'm glad you're coming to that realization," I said carefully. "But Vanessa, I need you to understand something. What you did to me, it wasn't just theft. You made me doubt my own mind. You made me think I was losing myself. That kind of violation, it leaves scars that money can't heal." "I know. I was cruel. I was so focused on what I wanted, what I thought I needed, that I couldn't see you as a real person with feelings and dignity. I just saw you as an obstacle or a resource. And that makes me a monster, doesn't it?" The raw honesty in her voice surprised me. This wasn't the polished, confident woman who'd stolen from me. This was someone genuinely grappling with their own capacity for harm. "You made terrible choices," I said. "But choices can be changed. You still have years ahead of you, Vanessa. What you do with them is up to you. Will you ever forgive me?" I thought about that question for a long time. Forgiveness was complicated. It didn't erase the harm that had been done. It didn't mean forgetting or pretending it never happened. "I'm working on it," I finally said. "But forgiveness is a process, not a moment. And it's something I'm doing for myself, not for you. Because carrying anger and resentment, it only hurts me. You're already facing the consequences of your actions. My forgiveness or lack of it won't change that." "That's more than I deserve," she said quietly. "Thank you for taking my call. And Margaret? I really am sorry. For whatever that's worth." After we hung up, I sat in the growing darkness, thinking about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the discovery, the confrontation, the aftermath. All of it had changed me, but not in the ways I might have expected. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't afraid. I was stronger, more aware, more conscious of my own worth and my own instincts. I'd learned that trust, while important, shouldn't come at the expense of vigilance. That love for family doesn't mean accepting abuse. That being vulnerable doesn't mean being a victim. Marcus and Zoe arrived for dinner an hour later. We'd made it a tradition, Thursday night dinners where we cooked together and talked about our weeks. Tonight, Zoe was making her specialty vegetarian lasagna, while Marcus worked on a salad. "Guess who called me today?" I said as we worked. They both looked up curious. "Your mother," I told Marcus. "She wanted to apologize." Marcus's knife stilled on the cutting board. "What did you say?" "That I'm working on forgiveness. Not for her but for me." "Do you believe she was sincere?" Zoe asked. "I think she's sincere right now in this moment, sitting in prison with time to reflect. Whether that sincerity survives when she's released and back in the real world, I don't know. But that's not my concern. My concern is making sure I don't let what happened define the rest of my life." We ate dinner on the back patio, talking and laughing as the stars came out. At 73, I'd faced one of the worst betrayals imaginable and come through it. I discovered reserves of strength I didn't know I possessed. I'd learned to trust my instincts and to fight for myself when necessary. But more than that, I'd learned that resilience isn't about never falling down. It's about choosing to get back up, to rebuild, to keep going even when it would be easier to give up. It's about finding purpose in the pain and using your experience to help others avoid the same fate. The Amazon packages that had nearly destroyed my life had instead become the catalyst for a new chapter. One where I was more than just someone's mother or grandmother or victim. I was Margaret Foster, advocate, educator, survivor, and warrior for others who needed someone in their corner. And as I looked at my son and granddaughter laughing together in the warm spring evening, I knew that the most valuable thing Vanessa had tried to steal from me, my family, was stronger now than it had ever been. Not despite what we'd been through, but because of it. We'd faced the worst together and emerged on the other side. Scarred perhaps, but unbroken. And that, I'd learned, was worth more than any package that could ever be delivered to my door. The morning after Vanessa's phone call, I woke with a clarity I hadn't expected. The conversation had unsettled me initially, but as dawn light filtered through my bedroom curtains, I realized something important. Hearing her voice again, hearing what sounded like genuine remorse, hadn't reopened old wounds. Instead, it had shown me how far I'd traveled from the confused, frightened woman who'd answered the door to that Amazon driver 18 months ago. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, reviewing the materials Patricia and I had prepared for our next workshop. We'd been invited to present at the state legislature's Committee on Aging, an opportunity to potentially influence policy around elder financial protection. The presentation needed to be compelling, backed by data but driven by real stories. My story. The doorbell rang at 8 o'clock sharp. Patricia stood on my doorstep holding a bakery box and wearing the determined expression that meant she'd already been working for hours. "Almond croissants," she announced, sweeping past me into the kitchen. "And I've been thinking about the legislative presentation. We need to emphasize the systemic failures that allowed your case to progress as far as it did. The banks that didn't flag unusual activity, the lack of coordination between agencies, the assumption that elderly people are inherently unreliable witnesses to their own exploitation." We spread out our materials on the dining room table, and for the next 3 hours we worked through every aspect of our presentation. Patricia had compiled statistics from across the state. Elder financial abuse was estimated to cost Arizona seniors over $500 million annually, and those were only the reported cases. The actual number was likely far higher. "The problem is visibility," Patricia said, circling a particularly troubling statistic with her pen. "Most victims don't report because they're ashamed, or they're protecting family members, or they've been manipulated into believing they're the ones at fault. Your willingness to speak publicly about what happened, Margaret, that's what makes our advocacy work powerful." My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. He was dealing with a difficult client meeting and needed to vent. Over the past year, our communication had evolved into something more reciprocal. I wasn't just the parent being checked on. I was someone whose judgment he valued, whose perspective he sought. The shift had been gradual but profound. I texted back words of encouragement, then returned to the presentation materials. Patricia was right about the importance of visibility, but speaking publicly about my experience never got easier. Each time I stood before a group and detailed how my daughter-in-law had drugged and robbed me, I felt exposed, vulnerable. But I also saw the recognition in other faces, the way people would approach me afterward with their own stories, their own suspicions, their own need for validation. "Have you heard from any of Vanessa's other victims lately?" Patricia asked as if reading my thoughts. I had. Robert Chun, no relation to Patricia despite sharing a last name, had been one of Marcus's oldest clients. Vanessa had convinced him that she was helping him organize his finances while actually draining his accounts. He'd lost over $40,000 before the investigation uncovered the theft. Now 78 and living on a significantly reduced income, he attended every one of our workshops, determined to prevent others from suffering the same fate. Robert called yesterday, I said. He's been talking to his grandson about creating some kind of app that would help seniors monitor their accounts for suspicious activity. Something simple enough for people who aren't tech-savvy but sophisticated enough to catch the kinds of patterns Vanessa used. That's brilliant, Patricia said. We should connect him with that fintech incubator downtown. This is exactly the kind of practical solution that could make a real difference. The work felt meaningful in a way I hadn't anticipated. For decades, my identity had been centered around caretaking, raising Marcus, supporting Robert through his career, being the grandmother Zoe needed. All of that had been important, but it had also been about supporting other people's lives and ambitions. This advocacy work was mine. It had grown from my pain, my experience, my determination to extract something valuable from something horrible. At noon, Zoe arrived with lunch from the Thai place she knew I loved. She'd been doing this more often lately, stopping by between classes at the community college where she was studying social work. The career choice hadn't surprised me. Zoe had always been sensitive to injustice, quick to defend the underdog. What her mother had done had only strengthened that instinct. "Grandma, I need to talk to you about something," she said as we unpacked containers of pad thai and green curry. Patricia had left an hour earlier, taking half our materials to have them professionally printed for the legislative presentation. "Of course, sweetheart. What's on your mind?" Zoe pushed her food around with her fork, gathering her thoughts. "I've been thinking about visiting Mom." The statement hung in the air between us. In the year since Vanessa's incarceration, Zoe hadn't seen her mother once. She'd refused all phone calls, all letters. Marcus had supported her decision, believing that Zoe needed space to process the betrayal without pressure to forgive or understand. What changed? I asked carefully. I'm not sure anything changed exactly, but I'm studying all this stuff about family systems and trauma and healing, and I keep thinking about her. Not forgiving her, not excusing what she did, but trying to understand how someone becomes capable of that. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. Understanding doesn't mean condoning. Sometimes we need to understand the darkness in order to more fully appreciate the light. Are you okay with it? With me visiting her? I reached across the table and took her hand. Zoe, you don't need my permission to have a relationship with your mother, whatever form that relationship takes. This is your journey, not mine. But she hurt you so badly. If I visit her, if I try to have some kind of connection with her, does that feel like a betrayal? No, I said firmly. Your mother made her choices, and she's facing the consequences. But you didn't choose any of this. You're allowed to navigate it however you need to. The fact that you're thinking so carefully about it tells me you're going to handle it with wisdom and maturity. Zoe's eyes filled with tears. I'm scared though. Scared of what she'll say, scared of how I'll feel. Scared that maybe I'll start making excuses for her, or that I'll hate her even more than I already do. Those are all valid fears. Have you talked to your therapist about this? She nodded. Dr. Williams thinks it might actually be healthy, as long as I go in with clear boundaries and realistic expectations. She said I should write down what I want to get from the visit, what questions I want answered, and what my limits are. That sounds like good advice. And Zoe, whatever happens during that visit, whatever you feel or discover, you can talk to me about it. Always. We finished lunch talking about her classes, her part-time job at the senior center, her plans for the summer. But I could see her mind working through the decision, weighing risks and needs and possibilities. She was so much stronger than I'd been at her age, so much more self-aware. After she left, I sat in my living room thinking about Vanessa. The phone call had been unexpected, but maybe Zoe's desire to visit was the natural next step in a process none of us could have predicted. Healing wasn't linear. It didn't follow a convenient timeline or a prescribed path. Sometimes it meant confronting the source of pain directly, not to reconcile, but to reclaim power over your own narrative. My phone rang. It was Detective Sarah Morrison, the investigator who'd handled my case. We'd stayed in touch, and she occasionally consulted me when working on other elder abuse cases. Margaret, I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. I wanted to run something by you. Of course, Detective. What can I help with? We have a case that's similar to yours in some ways. 74-year-old woman, suspicious financial activity, family member with access to her accounts. But she's refusing to cooperate with the investigation. She keeps insisting it's all a misunderstanding, that her nephew is helping her manage her money, not stealing it. I was wondering if you might be willing to talk to her. I'd done this before, met with other victims at Detective Morrison's request. Sometimes hearing from someone who'd been through a similar experience made the difference between denial and acknowledgement. Other times it made no difference at all. People had to be ready to see the truth, and that readiness couldn't be forced. What's her name? I asked. Dorothy Brennan. She lives over in Scottsdale in one of those independent living communities. On paper, she should be fine financially. Good pension, solid investments. But in the past 6 months, her accounts have been nearly emptied. The nephew has her convinced that he's making investments on her behalf, but we can't find any evidence of legitimate investment activity. Does she have other family? Anyone who's concerned? A daughter in California who noticed the problem when she was reviewing her mother's finances during a visit. The daughter tried to talk to Dorothy about it, and Dorothy got so upset that she told her daughter not to visit anymore. Now the daughter is frantic, the nephew has even more access and control, and Dorothy is becoming increasingly isolated. The pattern was horribly familiar. Isolation was often the key to maintaining financial abuse. Cut the victim off from outside perspectives, from people who might ask questions or raise concerns. Create a bubble where the abuser's version of reality is the only one the victim hears. I'll talk to her, I said. But Detective, you know I can't make any promises. If she's not ready to hear it, nothing I say will matter. I understand, but you've got credibility that I don't have. You're not law enforcement. You're not family with an agenda. You're someone who's been where she is and came out the other side. Sometimes that's enough to crack the denial. We arranged for me to visit Dorothy the following day. After hanging up, I felt the familiar mix of purpose and dread that these conversations always brought. I wanted to help, wanted to use my experience to protect others. But I also knew how painful it was to have your reality challenged, to confront the possibility that someone you love has been betraying you. That evening, Marcus came by after work. He looked exhausted, the kind of bone-deep tired that comes from more than just long hours. We sat on the back patio with glasses of iced tea, watching the desert sunset paint the sky in shades of purple and gold. Zoe told me she's thinking about visiting her mother, he said after a long silence. She mentioned it to me too. How do you feel about that? Marcus rubbed his face with both hands. Honestly? Terrified. Angry. Sad. All of it. Part of me wants to protect her, to tell her she doesn't owe Vanessa anything, that she should just move on and never look back. But another part of me knows that's not realistic or healthy. It's her choice to make. I know. I just worry that Vanessa will manipulate her, make excuses, try to minimize what she did. Zoe's strong, but she's also compassionate. She wants to believe the best in people. That's a beautiful quality, but it also makes her vulnerable. Zoe knows what her mother did. She watched you go through the divorce, watched the business nearly collapse, watched me struggle with the aftermath. She's not naive about any of this. If she chooses to visit, it won't be because she's forgotten or forgiven. It will be because she needs something for herself. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Do you think Vanessa has really changed? That phone call she made to you, do you think it was genuine? I think prison has given her time to reflect in ways she couldn't or wouldn't before. Whether that reflection translates into lasting change, I don't know. People can change, but it requires sustained effort and genuine remorse, not just words. I hate that she's still affecting our lives, Marcus said, his voice thick with frustration. Even from prison, even after everything, she's still this presence we have to navigate around. When does it end? When do we get to just move on? Maybe we don't move on completely. Maybe we just learn to carry it differently. The hurt becomes part of our story, but it doesn't define the whole story. Marcus looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. How did you get so wise about all this? Most people who went through what you did would be bitter, closed off. But you've turned it into this whole advocacy mission. You're helping strangers, speaking at legislatures, completely rewriting your life at 73. How? I thought about his question carefully. Because the alternative was to let what she did destroy me. To spend whatever years I have left feeling victimized and powerless. And I decided I wasn't going to give her that power. What she did was horrible, but my response to it is mine to choose. I can be bitter or I can be better. I chose better. I'm trying to do the same, Marcus said quietly. The business is slowly recovering. I've got some new clients who are giving me a chance despite everything. But there are still days when I'm so angry I can barely function. Angry at Vanessa for what she did. Angry at myself for not seeing it. Angry at the universe for letting it happen at all. Anger is part of the process. Don't fight it. Just don't let it become the only thing you feel. We sat in comfortable silence as darkness settled over the desert. Somewhere in the distance a coyote called, a wild sound that reminded me how thin the line was between civilization and nature, between control and chaos. We build our lives with such care, such attention to structure and safety, and then something happens to remind us how fragile it all is. The next morning I drove to Scottsdale to meet Dorothy Brennan. The independent living community was pleasant, well-maintained, with wide walking paths and carefully tended gardens. It was the kind of place where people came to enjoy their retirement years in comfort and security. The irony of Dorothy being financially abused while living in such a safe-seeming environment wasn't lost on me. Dorothy herself answered the door of her small villa. She was tiny, barely 5 feet tall, with silver hair styled in soft curls and intelligent blue eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She looked at me with polite confusion. "Mrs. Brennan? I'm Margaret Foster. Detective Morrison asked if I might stop by to talk with you." Her expression shifted immediately to wariness. "I've already told the detective. There's been a terrible misunderstanding. My nephew Brian is helping me with my finances. He hasn't done anything wrong." "I understand. May I come in anyway? I promise I'm not here to accuse anyone of anything. I just wanted to share my own experience with you, in case it might be helpful." She hesitated, clearly torn between politeness and suspicion, then stepped back to let me enter. Her villa was charming, filled with photographs and mementos of a life well lived. I saw pictures of children and grandchildren, vacation photos from exotic locations, evidence of hobbies and interests and connections. We sat in her living room, and I noticed how she kept glancing at the phone on the side table, as if expecting or hoping for an interruption. "Mrs. Brennan, about 18 months ago, an Amazon delivery driver asked me why I'd ordered 47 packages in 2 weeks. I hadn't ordered any of them. Someone had been using my account, having items delivered to my house, and selling them for cash. That someone was my daughter-in-law." Dorothy's expression softened slightly. "That must have been very upsetting." "It was more than upsetting. It turned out she'd been stealing from me for months, drugging me to keep me confused and compliant, systematically emptying my accounts. By the time I discovered what was happening, she'd taken over $60,000. "But that's different," Dorothy said quickly. "Your daughter-in-law was a criminal. Brian isn't like that. He's family. He's helping me because my investments were too complicated for me to manage on my own." That's exactly what I thought about Vanessa. She was family. She seemed concerned about me. She presented herself as helpful. But family doesn't make someone trustworthy, Mrs. Brennan. Sometimes family members are the ones who hurt us most because they have access and trust. "Brian wouldn't do that," she insisted, but I heard the slight tremor in her voice, the crack in her certainty. "Can you explain the investments he's making on your behalf? Where the money is going, what returns you're seeing?" She faltered. "He's explained it, but the terminology is very technical. Hedge funds and commodities and things I don't fully understand. But Brian understands. He went to business school. He knows about these things. Have you seen statements? Documentation of these investments? He keeps all that. He said it's easier if he manages the paperwork, that I don't need to worry about the details." The pattern was so familiar it made my chest ache. The technical jargon to confuse and intimidate. The assumption that the victim was too old or too unsophisticated to understand. The consolidation of information in the abuser's hands. All of it designed to maintain control while avoiding scrutiny. Mrs. Brennan, may I ask you something personal? When did your daughter last visit? Her face closed off immediately. Christina doesn't understand. She tried to turn me against Brian, making all sorts of accusations. I told her I wouldn't tolerate that kind of divisiveness in my family. So she expressed concerns about your finances, and you stopped allowing her to visit? She was trying to cause problems between Brian and me. He's the one who's been here, helping me, visiting regularly. Christina lives in California. She calls once a month if I'm lucky. Brian is here. And how often does Brian visit? 2 or 3 times a week. He takes me to appointments, helps me with groceries, makes sure I'm taking my medications properly. That's wonderful that he's so attentive, I said carefully. But Mrs. Brennan, sometimes the people who spend the most time with us do so because it gives them the most opportunity. Not because they care the most, but because they want access. Her hands clenched in her lap. You don't know him. You don't know our family. You're right, I don't. But I know what it feels like to defend someone who's betraying you. I know how hard it is to accept that someone you love might be hurting you. I defended Vanessa even as the evidence mounted. I made excuses, blamed my age, my memory, anything except the obvious truth. Because accepting the truth meant accepting that someone I'd welcomed into my family had been preying on me. This is different, Dorothy said again, but her voice was weaker now. Is it? Your accounts have lost hundreds of thousands of dollars in 6 months. Your daughter, who presumably has no financial interest in your money, is concerned enough to risk your anger by speaking up. And you're defending the nephew who has complete control over your finances and is isolating you from the family member who questioned him. Tears welled in Dorothy's eyes. If Brian has been stealing from me, what does that say about my judgment? About my ability to take care of myself? I'm 74 years old. If I can't trust my own nephew, if I can't tell the difference between someone helping me and someone hurting me, then maybe everyone is right. Maybe I'm not capable of living independently anymore. There it was. The real fear underlying the denial. Not just the fear of betrayal, but the fear of what that betrayal revealed about her own capacity and competence. Mrs. Brennan, being victimized by someone you trust doesn't make you incompetent. It makes you human. These people are skilled manipulators. They know how to exploit trust, how to create dependence, how to make you doubt yourself. The fact that someone was able to deceive you doesn't mean you can't take care of yourself. It means someone took advantage of your trust and your love. But how do I know? She whispered. How do I know what's real anymore? By looking at the facts. By asking for documentation. By letting people who care about you help evaluate the situation objectively. Your daughter wants to help. The detective wants to help. I want to help. You don't have to do this alone. And you don't have to protect someone who might be hurting you. Dorothy was quiet for a long time, tears sliding down her cheeks. Finally, she spoke in a voice so soft I had to lean forward to hear it. Last month, I asked Brian for statements on the investments. He got very angry. He said I was questioning his integrity, that after everything he'd done for me, I should trust him. He didn't speak to me for 2 weeks. I was so afraid he'd stop visiting, stop helping me, that I apologized. I told him I did trust him, that I'd never question him again. And that's when you told your daughter not to visit anymore? After Brian's angry response. She nodded miserably. He said Christina was poisoning me against him, that I had to choose between listening to her or trusting him. I chose him because he's here and she's not. But now I'm wondering if I chose wrong. I reached over and took her hand. It's not too late to choose differently. You can ask for help. You can demand to see documentation. You can rebuild your relationship with your daughter. None of the doors are permanently closed. I'm scared, she admitted. Scared of what I'll find. Scared of being alone if Brian really has been stealing from me. Scared of losing my independence if everyone decides I can't be trusted to manage my own life. I understand those fears. I had all the same ones. But Dorothy, on the other side of that fear is clarity. Is agency. Is the power to make real choices about your life instead of living in doubt and confusion. Will you stay? She asked suddenly. While I call Detective Morrison. I don't want to do this alone. I stayed for 3 hours. Detective Morrison arrived with a financial forensics specialist. Dorothy called her daughter in California. A tearful conversation that ended with Christina booking a flight for the following day. Together, we began the process of unraveling what Brian had really been doing with Dorothy's money. The truth was worse than even Detective Morrison had suspected. Brian had created an elaborate scheme involving fake investment accounts, forged statements, and systematic withdrawal of Dorothy's funds for his own use. He'd been stealing from his aunt for nearly a year, taking advantage of her trust and her fear of appearing incompetent. By the time I left, Dorothy was exhausted but no longer alone. Christina had arrived despite the late hour, and the two women were beginning the difficult work of rebuilding their relationship and Dorothy's financial security. It would be a long process, painful and complicated. But Dorothy was no longer living in denial. She was facing the truth, however ugly it was. Driving home through the dark desert night, I thought about the conversation I'd had with Marcus about when the pain ends, when we get to move on. Maybe this was the answer. The pain didn't end. It transformed. It became purpose, became advocacy, became the ability to sit with someone else in their moment of crisis and say, "I've been there. You're not alone. There's a path forward." The legislative presentation was scheduled for the following week. Patricia and I spent hours refining our materials, practicing our delivery, anticipating questions. We included Dorothy's story with her permission, as an example of how quickly financial abuse could escalate when victims were isolated from concerned family members. The night before the presentation, Zoe came to stay with me. She'd made the decision to visit Vanessa and wanted to talk through her expectations and fears. We sat up late discussing what she hoped to accomplish, what boundaries she would maintain, what she would do if the visit went badly. "I think I need to see her as she really is," Zoe said. "Not the perfect mother I thought I had when I was little, and not the monster I've been imagining since everything happened. Just a person who made terrible choices and has to live with the consequences." "That's very mature," I said. "But Zoe, remember that she might still try to manipulate you. She might make excuses or try to blame others, or present herself as the real victim. Are you prepared for that?" "I think so. Dr. Williams helped me write down my script, what I want to say and how I'll respond to different scenarios. And I'm not going alone. Dad's coming with me, even though he doesn't want to see her. He'll wait in the visitor area in case I need him." The love between Marcus and his daughter was palpable. Despite his own pain and anger, he was willing to face the source of that pain to support Zoe. That, I thought, was what real strength looked like. Not the absence of fear or hurt, but the willingness to push through both for the people you love. The legislative presentation went better than I dared hope. Patricia was brilliant, marshaling facts and statistics with the precision of the attorney she'd once been. I told my story and Dorothy's and Robert Chen's. I explained how easy it was for abuse to flourish in the shadows, how shame and fear kept victims silent, how systemic changes could provide protection and accountability. When we finished, several committee members approached with questions and expressions of support. One representative, a woman in her 50s named Linda Martinez, was particularly engaged. "My mother experienced something similar before she died," she told me quietly. "A caregiver who was supposed to be helping her was actually stealing from her. By the time we discovered it, she'd lost almost everything. I've been trying to get protective legislation passed, but it's hard to make it a priority when there are so many competing issues. Your testimony today, your willingness to speak so openly about what happened, that's going to make a difference." Representative Martinez invited Patricia and me to meet with her staff to discuss specific policy proposals. We left the Capitol building feeling energized, purposeful. We were making a real impact, turning personal tragedy into systemic change. That evening Marcus called. The visit with Vanessa had taken place that afternoon, and he wanted to let me know how Zoe was doing. "She's okay, I think. Emotionally exhausted but okay. The visit was hard, but she handled it with incredible maturity." "Did Vanessa try to manipulate her?" "She tried. Made some excuses about how desperate she'd been, how the financial pressure had made her feel like she had no choice. But Zoe held firm. She told Vanessa that everyone has choices, and Vanessa had chosen to steal and lie and hurt people she claimed to love. She said she was willing to have a relationship, but only if Vanessa took full responsibility for what she'd done without excuses or justification. How did Vanessa respond to that? Not well at first. She got defensive, said Zoe was being harsh and unforgiving. But then Zoe stood up to leave and Vanessa backed down. She apologized, said she was still learning to accept what she'd done. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation, but it was honest. More honest than I expected. How are you feeling about all of it? Marcus sighed. Relieved that it's over. Proud of Zoe for handling it so well. And strangely sad. Not sad for Vanessa exactly, but sad for what our family could have been if she'd made different choices. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. You're grieving what you lost and what you never had. That's completely natural. Over the following months, several things shifted. The legislation Patricia and I had advocated for began moving through committee, with Representative Martinez as its champion. Our workshops expanded to include online components, reaching seniors across the state who couldn't attend in person. Robert Chen's grandson successfully launched his monitoring app, with both Patricia and me serving as advisors. Dorothy Brennan became an active member of our advocacy group, bringing her daughter Christina to meetings. Brian was arrested and charged with multiple counts of elder financial abuse and fraud. Dorothy was recovering only a portion of what he'd stolen, but she'd regained something more valuable, her sense of agency and her relationship with her daughter. Zoe continued to visit Vanessa monthly, maintaining careful boundaries while slowly building a new kind of relationship. It wasn't the mother-daughter connection either of them had once imagined, but it was real and honest in ways the previous relationship had never been. Marcus's architecture practice stabilized and then began to grow again. He'd partnered with another small firm, spreading the financial risk and creating a more sustainable business model. The new partnership included strict financial oversight and transparency measures, lessons learned from painful experience. As for me, I found myself living a life I could never have imagined 2 years earlier. I was busier at 74 than I'd been in decades, traveling to speak at conferences, consulting with law enforcement on financial abuse cases, serving on boards and committees dedicated to elder protection. The pain of what Vanessa had done hadn't disappeared, but it had been transformed into something meaningful. One Saturday afternoon in late spring, nearly 2 years after that Amazon driver had unknowingly saved my life, I hosted a garden party at my house. Patricia and Robert Chen were there, along with Dorothy and Christina, Representative Martinez and several of her staff members, Detective Morrison, and of course Marcus and Zoe. My backyard filled with conversation and laughter, with people who'd come together through shared experience of pain, but who'd created something beautiful from that pain. Marcus found me in the kitchen preparing more appetizers. "Mom, can I talk to you for a minute?" I turned to find him looking uncharacteristically nervous. "Of course, sweetheart. What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong exactly. I just wanted to tell you something, and I'm not sure how you'll react." My heart sped up slightly. "Okay. I've been seeing someone. Dating, I mean. Her name is Rachel. She's a landscape architect, divorced, 2 kids who are grown. We've been out a few times and it's been really nice. But I wanted to make sure you were okay with it before things got more serious." Relief washed over me. "Marcus, why would I not be okay with you dating?" "Because of everything that happened with Vanessa. Because I'm not sure I can trust my own judgment anymore when it comes to relationships. Because I'm terrified of making the same mistake again." I set down the knife I'd been using and turned to face him fully. "Marcus, what happened with Vanessa wasn't a failure of your judgment. She was skilled at deception. She fooled all of us, even the professionals who evaluated her. That doesn't mean you can't trust yourself, or that every relationship will end in betrayal. But how do I know? How do I trust that I'm seeing people clearly?" "You don't know for certain. Nobody does. But you're more aware now. You know what manipulation looks like. You know the warning signs. And you're not approaching new relationships with blind trust. You're being cautious and thoughtful, which is exactly right. So you really are okay with this? With me seeing Rachel?" "I'm more than okay with it. I'm happy for you. You deserve love and companionship. You deserve a partner who respects you and treats you well. And Marcus, I trust you to recognize the difference now." He hugged me tightly, and I felt the tension leave his body. "I want you to meet her. Soon, if that's okay. I want your opinion. I'd love to meet her." Later that evening, after all the guests had left and I was cleaning up the last traces of the party, I stood on my back patio looking out at the desert landscape. The sun was setting, painting the sky in those impossible colors that made Arizona sunsets famous. 2 years ago, I'd been lost in a fog of confusion and manipulation, my life slowly being stolen from me. Today I stood clear-headed and strong, surrounded by a community I'd helped build, doing work that mattered, connected to my family in deeper and more honest ways than ever before. Vanessa had tried to erase me, to reduce me to a confused old woman whose existence was nothing more than an obstacle to her ambitions. Instead, she'd inadvertently given me a mission, a purpose, a reason to fight not just for myself but for countless others facing similar predation. The irony wasn't lost on me. My phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. It was a photo from her visit with Vanessa earlier that week. Not of the two of them together, but of a letter Vanessa had written to me. In it, she thanked me for allowing Zoe to visit, acknowledged the harm she'd done, and expressed what sounded like genuine gratitude for the fact that I hadn't completely destroyed her relationship with her daughter. I read the letter twice, trying to assess its sincerity. It didn't matter, I realized. Whether Vanessa's remorse was real or performative wasn't my concern anymore. What mattered was that Zoe had the relationship she needed, that Marcus was healing and moving forward, that Dorothy and Robert and countless others were getting the support and advocacy they deserved. The Amazon packages that had nearly destroyed my life had instead delivered something unexpected. Not more possessions or material goods, but clarity, purpose, and the fierce determination to ensure that my pain would prevent someone else's. In the end, that was worth far more than anything that could have been ordered online. 3 years after that Amazon driver knocked on my door, I stood in the governor's office as she signed the Elder Financial Protection Act into law. Patricia stood beside me, and behind us were Dorothy, Robert, and 24 other survivors whose stories had driven this legislation forward. The cameras flashed as the governor handed me the ceremonial pen she'd used to sign the bill that would require financial institutions to flag suspicious activity on senior accounts and mandate reporting of suspected abuse. Representative Martinez had fought tirelessly for this legislation, but she insisted that Patricia and I stand beside the governor for the signing. We were the faces of the movement, she said. Our willingness to speak openly about our experiences had made the abstract concept of elder abuse real and urgent for lawmakers who might otherwise have seen it as a low priority. That evening, my house filled with celebration. Marcus arrived with Rachel, the woman he'd been dating for nearly a year. She was warm and genuine, and watching them together eased something in my chest I hadn't realized was still tight with worry. Zoe brought her new boyfriend, a social work student she'd met at the community college. Even Detective Morrison stopped by, bringing champagne and congratulations. The doorbell rang late in the evening. I opened it to find a young woman I didn't recognize holding a small package. Mrs. Foster? I'm Kevin's sister. He asked me to deliver this. Kevin, the Amazon driver who'd asked the question that changed everything. He'd moved to Oregon 6 months earlier for a new job, but we'd stayed in touch. Inside the package was a framed photograph of the two of us taken at one of our early workshops, along with a note. You turned 47 packages into a movement. Thank you for showing all of us what resilience looks like. Kevin. I set the frame on my mantle, next to the photos of Robert and Marcus and Zoe. It joined the collection of images that told the story of my life, the before and the after, the pain and the purpose that grew from it. Marcus found me there, looking at the photographs. You did something extraordinary, Mom. You took the worst thing that ever happened to you and used it to protect thousands of other people. We all did, I corrected. Every person who shared their story, who attended a workshop, who demanded accountability, we all did this together. As the last guests departed and I stood alone in my quiet house, I thought about Vanessa in prison, about the Amazon packages that had revealed her crimes, about the journey from victim to advocate. The path had been painful and uncertain, but it had led me here, to this moment of victory not just for myself, but for everyone who'd ever been made to feel powerless by someone they trusted. The best revenge I'd learned wasn't bitterness or anger. It was transformation. It was refusing to let the person who hurt you define your future. It was taking back your story and using it to change the world. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.